Hi, boys and girls. Miss Kathy here from Shaler, North Hills Library for another episode of Greek Myth Mania. And we are on week number 8 with Perseus and Medusa, who happens to be pictured here on the cover of our packet of papers. And I am modeling my stylish Medusa mask, which you too can make using the directions included in this packet, but we will get to that. Right now, if you would like to follow along with our story, we are moving to the Greek heroes this week. We did the 14 gods of Olympus, and now we're moving into some of their children, some of the heroes that you hear stories about. So this week is Perseus and Medusa, and if you would like to follow along in the Dolores book, there is a website listed that you can do that at. And we are on page 114, but we are actually going to start at the middle of page 115 because the other information we don't need so much. So we're starting with where it says, when King Danis grew old, there was no heir to his throne. And since there's no pictures to look at, I'm just going to sit back here and read, and you can sit back and relax and listen. He had to send for his daughter Hypermnestra and Lynceus, who were living in great happiness. She was his daughter, and that was a prince that had wed her. They became king and queen of Argos, and their son became king after them. When he died, his son Acrisius inherited the throne. Acrisius, however, had no son. He had only a beautiful golden-haired daughter whose name was Danae, but her beauty brought no joy to her father. He wanted a son, an heir to his kingdom. When an oracle told him that he would die by the hand of his daughter's son, remember, an oracle is a prophet teller, he put Danae in a sealed chamber that had neither windows nor doors, only an opening in the roof. There no suitor could see her beauty, and she could remain unwed and childless. But Acrisius forgot to reckon with Zeus. The thunder god spied the lonesome maiden through the opening in the roof, and in the shape of a golden shower he descended to her. And that's what this picture is showing. You can see the face of Zeus in the golden shower coming down. No longer was Danae lonesome, for now she was the happy bride of Zeus. But when her father heard the cries of an infant from her chamber, he broke through the walls in a rage, intending to kill his grandson. When he learned that Zeus was the child's father, he did not dare to lay a hand on him. Instead, he put Danae and her son Perseus in a chest and threw it into the sea. If they drowned, Poseidon would be to blame. Zeus gently steered the chest to the shore of an island, and a fisherman who was casting his nets hauled it in. Great was his surprise when he saw what the chest contained. When Danae had told him her story, he took her and little Perseus to his hut and cared for them as if they were his own, for he was a kind old man and childless. So there we have a picture of him dragging her to shore. I guess that would be kind of a surprise, huh? In his humble hut, Perseus grew into a fine and valiant youth, proud of being the son of Zeus and the beautiful Danae. But Danae's beauty attracted the eye of the ruthless king of the island. He wanted her for his queen. In vain did Danae turn him away. She was the bride of Zeus and swore she could marry no other. The king pursued her and would have carried her off by force if Perseus had not protected her. The scheming king decided to get rid of Perseus, and he let it be known that he was going to marry a princess from a neighboring island. As was the custom, all the men in the kingdom brought him gifts. Only Perseus was so poor that he had nothing to give. So he offered his services to the king instead. This is just what the king had expected. "Slay the monster Medusa and bring me her head," he said. No man who had ever set out to kill Medusa had come back, and the king was sure now that he was forever rid of Perseus. Medusa was one of 3 horrible Gorgon sisters, so gruesome that all living creatures turned to stone at the sight of them. They lived on an island far out to sea, but nobody knew just where. Perseus bid his mother goodbye and set off to search for Medusa. He went over land and over sea, asking his way, but nobody could tell him where the Gorgons lived. As he stood at a crossroad, wondering which way to go, Athena and Hermes suddenly appeared, remember? Athena, the goddess of wisdom, and Hermes, the messenger god. Zeus had sent them to help him. They could tell him the way to the island of the Gorgons, but he needed more help than that. Athena lent him her shield, polished as brightly as a mirror. Hermes lent him his sword, which was so sharp that it could cut through the hardest metal, and he also needed 3 magic things owned by the nymphs of the north, they told him. But even the gods did not know where these nymphs lived. That was a secret closely guarded by the 3 Gray Sisters, and they would never willingly reveal it, for they were the Gorgon sisters. But Hermes offered to take Perseus to them and find a way to get the secret out of them. He took Perseus under his arm, swung himself into the air, and flew off, swifter than the wind. They flew far, far to the west, and at last they came to a land where the sun never shone, and everything was as gray as dusk. There sat the 3 Gray Sisters. Their hair was gray, their faces were gray, and they had only 1 gray eye between them, which they took turns looking through, used to pass it around. As one of the sisters was handing the eye to another, Perseus sprang forward and snatched it. "Now I have your eye," cried Perseus. "You will never get it back unless you tell me the way to the nymphs of the north." The 3 Gray Sisters wailed and begged for their eye, but Perseus would not give it back, so they had to tell him the way. Again Hermes took him under his arm and flew with him far, far to the north, beyond the north wind, where the sun never set. The nymphs of the north received them kindly, and when they heard why Perseus had come, they gladly lent him the 3 things he needed. 1, a pair of winged sandals to carry him through the air. 2, a cap to make him invisible, and a magic bag to hold whatever was put into it. That was the 3rd thing, the magic bag. Now he was ready to slay the Medusa, said Hermes. He showed him the way and wished him good luck. Wearing the winged sandals, Perseus flew far to the west. When he came to the island of the Gorgons, he did not look down. He looked instead into Athena's polished shield and shuddered at the sight he saw mirrored there. The 3 Gorgon sisters were lying on the shore, fast asleep. Long yellow fangs hung from their grinning mouths. On their heads grew writhing snakes instead of hair, and their necks were covered with scales of bronze. Around them stood the strangest stones. It was easy to see that they had once been men. Looking into the mirroring shield, Perseus swooped down, and with one deft stroke he cut off the Medusa's head. Out from the monster's severed neck sprang a beautiful winged horse, the Pegasus. He neighed, and the other two Gorgons awoke. Quickly, Perseus threw Medusa's head into the magic bag and swung himself into the air. Wailing, the two Gorgon sisters took to the air on heavy wings in groping pursuit. But they could not find him, for he had put on the magic cap of invisibility. So here we have, he has just cut her head off, and there's her body, and out of it is springing Pegasus, the winged horse. And we have the other Gorgons trying to find him, but they can't because he is invisible. And we have the statues down on the sand of people that had turned to stone by looking at her. So what's going on in that picture there? We are looking around here, though. On his way home, as he flew over the coast of Ethiopia, Perseus saw, far below, a beautiful maiden chained to a rock by the sea. So here he is, he's flying along with Medusa's head, thinking everything's wonderful and his adventure is over. And what does he see? Lo and behold, a princess tied to a rock. She was so pale that at first he thought she was a marble statue, but then he saw tears trickling from her eyes. He swooped down and tore at her chains, trying to break them. "Flee," she said, "or you too will be devoured by the sea monster." But Perseus refused to leave, and she told her sad story. Her name was Andromeda, and she was the daughter of King Cepheus and Queen Cassiopeia. Her mother was very vain, and had boasted unwisely that she was even lovelier than the Nereids. Poseidon could not tolerate having a mortal compare herself to the goddesses of the sea, his sea. And as punishment he sent a sea monster to ravage the kingdom of Ethiopia. To appease the angry god and save his kingdom, so that means to satisfy the god, her father had to sacrifice her, his only, of course I'm having a hard time turning the page here, his only daughter to the monster. And there she stood, chained to the cliff, waiting to be devoured. She had begged the prince to whom she was engaged to save her, but he had fled in fear. He went running away. He didn't want to battle a sea monster. "I shall save you, and you shall be mine," said Perseus. As he spoke, a horrible sea monster came from the sea, its huge mouth opened wide to swallow Andromeda. But Perseus sprang into the air, dived at the monster, and drove his sword deep into its throat. The monster bellowed, lashed its tail wildly, and rolled over on its back. It sank, and the sea was tinted red by its blood. Ever since, that stretch of water has been called the Red Sea. And there really is a Red Sea today. No sooner was the monster dead than Andromeda's cowardly suitor returned, with many warriors to claim her for his bride. So that was the man she was supposed to marry, who fled because he didn't want to battle the monster. Now he sees everything is safe again, so he says, "Okay, I'll marry you now. I want you back." But, ha ha ha, now he was bold and menacing, and King Cepheus did not dare to oppose him, so her own dad is not going to tell him no. "Andromeda, shield your eyes," cried Perseus, and with that he lifted the head of Medusa out of the bag. The suitor and all his men stared into it, and horror and whips, they were changed into stones. Unfortunately, the king and the queen had also looked at the Gorgon's head, and they too turned into stone. But since a son of Zeus was going to marry their daughter, the gods took pity on them and hung Cepheus and Cassiopeia in the sky as constellations. And you can look them up in stargazing kit and find the constellations. We have some other ones in our packet here we'll talk about later. Perseus lifted Andromeda into his arms and flew homeward. But when he arrived at the fisherman's hut, he learned that Danae and the fisherman had gone into hiding. As soon as the king of the island had gotten rid of Perseus, he had tried to carry Danae off. To save her, the kind old fisherman had fled with her. When Perseus heard that, he made straight for the king's palace. "Here is the head you wanted," he shouted, and pulled Medusa's head out of the bag. Startled, the king and his men looked up, and there they sat, turned into statues of stone, some of them with their mouths still open in astonishment. The people of the island rejoiced at being rid of the tyrant, and as soon as the fisherman and Danae came out of hiding, they made the fisherman their new king. He gave Perseus and Andromeda the grandest of wedding feasts, and everybody was happy. Perseus did not keep the Gorgon's head. It was much too dangerous for a mortal to own. He gave it to Athena when he returned her shield and the other magic objects he had borrowed. Perseus thought that his grandfather Acrisius would be happy to see him now that he was a hero, and he set sail for Argos, remember his homeland where he had come from, with Danae and Andromeda. But when the old king learned that his grandson was approaching, he fled, for he still remembered the oracle's warning. And so, with the old king gone, Perseus became king of Argos, of his original land. Perseus ruled wisely and well, his mother and his wife always at his side. Since he was a great athlete, he also took part in games all over Greece. One day, a sudden gust of wind changed the course of a discus he had thrown. So that's like a round disc that's kind of flat, kind of like a frisbee. And it killed an old man who was watching the game, went boom straight into his head. Who should that old man be but Acrisius, his own grandfather? Thus the words of the oracle came true. After that, Percy no longer wanted to live in his grandfather's city of Argos, so he founded instead the splendid fortified city of Mycenae, not far away, and many great kings and heroes were descended from him and Andromeda. When at last Perseus and Andromeda died, Zeus put them too in the sky as constellations. There's Perseus, and this is Andromeda, and this is Cepheus and Cassiopeia, the king and queen of Andromeda's land, her parents. So, rough shape of constellations that you would see up in the sky. And near them is Pegasus, this is the winged horse, and this is the whale, which I think is supposed to be like the sea monster that came up to almost eat Andromeda. And that is the myth of Perseus. Okay, let's see if we can see anything else about him in our weird but true book from National Geographic. Why he's weird, Perseus could fly thanks to the winged sandals he borrowed from Hermes. Let me move a little bit closer so you can see the pages a little bit better here. think most of this we read. What do you get when the myth of Perseus meets fiction? Percy Jackson. The super popular book series is based on the stories of Perseus, Percy Jackson, son of Poseidon. Like the mythical Perseus, Percy faces off with the Titan Atlas. He also has a run-in with Medusa, although in the modern version she's a shop owner named Aunt M, not a horrible-looking monster. But, like his mythical namesake, Percy chops off her head just before she can turn him into stone. Here's a picture of Pegasus. Myth says that the real-life Atlas Mountains were formed when Perseus waved Medusa's head in front of the Titan Atlas, turning him into stone. I must say, I've never heard that before, but it is in this one book. We read about his grandfather getting killed. And that is it for Perseus from this book. It's basically what we read. And this book, I think, is pretty much no different. It is pictured in here. Perseus with the stars that would be shown in that constellation. The ill-fated hero, it calls him, because he tried to get away from the prophecy, but regardless, he ended up killing his own grandfather. It is among the largest northern sky constellations visible in winter, especially December. It contains double stars. Some are simply lined up to appear close to each other, but really are far apart. Others are binary, so close they are caught in each other's gravity in mutual orbit. It also contains variable stars. Some brightness varies because they swell and shrink. For others, brightness varies because of an orbiting star that eclipses them sometimes. So it says it has double stars, ones that come together in clusters. And then, of course, it has single stars as well, spaced out. Don't think there's anything else in here. He was very clever to use the shield to look at her. Here's a picture of the serpent about to attack Andromeda. And then we get on to the next story. So that is about the end of the Perseus from the books. Very similar in all of them. He is a very popular hero. Okay, let's take a look at our packet here. First up, let's begin by coloring a picture of him. There's a picture of him holding Medusa's head. Okay, then we can read along. A site that has some additional stories about him. A short made for kids video. If that doesn't work, it tells you how to locate it. And here is the poem, The Myth of Perseus and Medusa, written by Paul Perot. Let's see if we can read this poem here. This is the tale of the great Perseus, legendary son of the mighty Zeus. He lived in Seriphus with Danae, his beautiful mother, easy on the eye. When the king met Danae, he was impressed. He said, "Marry me." It was not a request. Danae found the king obnoxious and mean. She really did not want to be his queen. The king got angry at this rejection, so Perseus came to her protection. He said to the king, "Please drop this demand, and I will do anything you command." The king sneered and replied to him, "You, sir, must bring me the head of the Gorgon Medusa." Perseus replied, "The thing that you ask is sure to be an impossible task. I did promise, though, so I'll do my best. and off he marched on his epic quest. The Gorgon's sisters were nasty creatures, horrible hags with hideous thick features, bodies covered in scales, sharp knife-like claws, big leathery wings, and tusks like a boar's. Medusa had no hair on her head. She had a writhing mass of snakes instead. She really was such an ugly old crone. Just one look at her would turn you to stone. Young Perseus knew he had no chance. He would be turned to stone with just one glance. The gods, however, were watching from on high, and they had pity on this poor guy. They gave him a super sharp crystal sword. That was supposed to be from Hermes in our story, much better than any he could afford. They gave him a shield that shone like silver. That was from Athena. It gave a reflection like a mirror. Next, Perseus had to discover where Medusa and her sisters had their lair. The gods had given an indication that 3 gray women knew the location. 3 old sisters dressed in rags, almost blind and toothless hags. They had one eye that they all shared, not quite blind, but visually impaired. They did not see Perseus tiptoe by, not until he reached out and grabbed their eye. Above the chorus of protestation, he said he wanted information. So they told him where to find the Gorgon, and Perseus gave back the stolen organ. He found the place and was surprised to see it was filled with statues. Why should that be? He said to himself, well, I do suppose these must all have been the Gorgon's foes. So into the monster's lair he crept, and into the room where Medusa slept. He held up the shield, polished and shiny, and used the reflection so he could see. He then used his sword to kill the old hag and put her severed head into his bag. The sisters awoke and saw what he'd done, and Perseus thought he had better run. Our hero made it back to Seriphus. When the king saw him, he was pretty cross. He had thought the young man would have been killed, but he had not, and the king wasn't thrilled. You must let my mum go, Perseus said. I've killed Medusa and brought you her head. The king said, no, I don't care. I command that Danae gives me her hand. Perseus snarled, here's your wedding present, and plucked from the bag something quite unpleasant. He held Medusa's head up in the air. Its eyes fixed the king with a cold, dead stare. The king gasped and gave out a little moan. Then he went quiet. He had turned to stone. And so this tale of danger and violence ends with just a stony silence. So that didn't have all the different parts in it, but enough to convey the main ideas of the story. Okay, after the poem, we have a matching page. See if you can match up which description goes with which name. And a crossword puzzle, and I did include the answers to the crossword puzzle. For some reason, I did not include the answers to the matching game. And a word search. Lots of names to find. And then the Medusa Mask. As you can see, there are many variations you can do to it. They said about making 5 snakes, and that is what I made as well, but you can certainly make more if you would like. And then just put it on some string or elastic and tie it on, and you are good to go. And then there is a constellation named after Perseus we talked about, and Andromeda, and you can learn about them at these sites here. And see them actually as you would if you saw them looking up into the sky. A couple different ones to choose from there. So, hopefully you are able to print out our packet and do some of those activities along with us. And I look forward to seeing you next time when we will explore another Greek hero on Greek Myth Mania. And remember, you can come into Shaler Public Library 6 days a week. Just check the website for the hours if you want to pick out your own awesome books about the Greek myths or any books that you want to get. But if you don't want to come in, we're still happy to serve you at our window. Just call and tell us what you want, and we will get it ready for you. So thanks for watching. This has been Miss Medusa Kathy here today, and Perseus. I will see you next time. Bye.